This episode of One More Thing Before I Go is sponsored by Anchor.fm. When I first had the idea of making the show, my primary obstacle was deciding which platform to use for my recording, hosting, and distribution. Anchor made it so easy because they do all three things and much, much more. It's free. They have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. You can make money from your podcast, whether you have 2 listeners or 2,000. It's everything you need to make a podcast, all in one place. All you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Hello, friends, and welcome to One More Thing Before I Go, the podcast that celebrates the extraordinary lives of everyday people. You're in for a treat today. I spent some time with one of my favorite people in the entire world and got to hear her story from start to finish. Michelle's story is full of joy and sadness, laughter and tears. She's an incredible mother of 3 children with another one on the way. She and her husband Kevin have amazing hearts to help the people around them, and it's led by her beautiful spirit of compassion and forgiveness amidst all the brokenness and pain of life. I truly believe after this chat that you all will love her little family as much as mine does. And there was so much packed into one conversation that I decided we should split it in half. So, enjoy the first part of our conversation with my dear friend Michelle. And don't worry, tune in soon to hear the conclusion of her amazing story. I'm here with Moriah Rock. She's a really good friend of mine. We've known each other for a number of years, and we were just talking a few minutes ago. I didn't even know Michelle and Moriah are both first names of hers. So that's an interesting story, and it kind of is a microcosm of really her entire tale that she's going to share with you today. So let's start with there. How did you get 2 first names?
So my mom named me Moriah, which she named me, and it meant is seen by God. And that was the reason she gave me that name. And then she named me, my middle name was Michelle. And she went home, and my father didn't show up for my birth, and he didn't show up until a month after I was born. And when he learned what my name was, he didn't approve. So he had her change it to Michelle Moriah. So I had 2 birth certificates, and then they split up. My mom then moved to Oklahoma, and when she enrolled me in school for the first time, as kind of a in spite of your dad, she enrolled me as Moriah instead of as Michelle. So people who knew me from school call me Moriah, or people that were introduced as we got older, by my friends call me Moriah. In my homeschool community, I'm known as both. Oftentimes people meet me and they just say, "Oh, well, this fits you more." And they will call me that, which I'm totally fine with. But my family still calls me Michelle. So a lot of people who I've met through family, like at church and so on, call me Michelle. So I still to this day go by both. I don't have a preference. I love both. Both have very strong meaning, and to me have kind of like been a light and given me hope. And I feel like, names do have meanings and are very important when we give to our children. And it speaks a lot of truth into our life and kind of who we are.
Yeah. And I know, I'm not sure if you guys have actually landed on a name, but you're expecting baby number 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that was something you've been talking about recently on social media, is names have a lot of meaning. And so you were kind of throwing it out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We actually have landed on a first name, and we're going to go with Noah. Now,
okay.
It's not as original as Benaya. It's more common, but we Noah's story. And we want to give our children names that have a lot of meaning and kind of give them an idea of, kind of who they are. And I don't know.
your own name really is part of your story. It's kind of tied in, and I feel like if I could encapsulate your life and everything that I know about you into two words, it's this idea of beauty and tragedy, and both of them really couldn't exist without the other, I think. Could you maybe shine some light on that so other people understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree. I've I've read it time and time again and just heard stories, and that is something that's often been on my mind with the life that we live in, and in the fallen world, and hearing other people's struggles with cancer or losing a loved one or losing a child. Why it is that we go through trauma and these horrible things. Like, what is it? Why does God allow all of these things to happen? But there's one verse and a song that I heard when I was a child that I used to hold on to that really kind of spoke that to me. It was "Beauty from Ashes," and I don't remember who that's by. So that was something I heard as a child through all my trauma and kind of held on to, and thought, one day something good's going to come out of this. I don't know what. I definitely don't know how, but something will. And it did, and I'm in that now, and it's wonderful and beautiful, and I love it, and I wouldn't change anything. Or I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, another part of that is I think we can't have a relationship with the Creator without these things. As hard as that is to accept and to kind of realize is, what is the need to have a relationship with God or to pray if your life is perfect and everything is fine. It's in those moments, those dark times, the hard times of losing someone or going through, sickness or trauma, whatever that is, it's in those moments that we reach out to God and we have this hole that we need filled. It's there where the beauty can happen. And he does take, he tells us, he says, be thankful for these things, like praise me in those times, which again, I know is hard to wrap our minds around, but it's through those things that beautiful things come. And I've definitely been a testament to that in my life and seen that.
Do you mind taking us back a little bit?
Yeah. So growing up, like I mentioned, my mom and my dad were from California. But shortly after my mom had me, she moved to a small southern town in Oklahoma, put us from San Diego on the beach to a trailer in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, surrounded by woods and hills and deer. Now, I don't say that in a dark light. I love it here, and I think it is absolutely beautiful, and I definitely enjoyed playing outside in the red dirt when I was a kid. So
well, you're back now, so
yeah, it's really funny that I'm back, because there was so many times that I was like, there is nothing I want more than to be far away. And not only am I like literally back in Oklahoma, I don't know if you even know this, I am renting like a new trailer on my mom's property.
Oh, wow.
Like literally the same place that I grew up. I am here with my children. My mom moved to Michigan. So yeah, I don't think that things are just ironic, and I don't think there's coincidence. I think God does everything on purpose, and I definitely think he has a sense of humor. Anyway, so yeah, I moved to Little Noble, Oklahoma. My mom was a single mom of 10 kids. A lot of us had different fathers, none of which were around. And if they were, it was for very short periods of time and in very toxic situations. We had a lot of physical abuse and sexual abuse in the home when we had any kind of male figure present. That didn't last long. We were very poor, as you can imagine, just trying to have 10 children by yourself. No child support. My mom worked as often as she could, oftentimes had 2 jobs, so she wasn't home. So we really lacked a lot of like your traditional idea of a family, values, dinners together, things as that. I grew up definitely very different than a lot of my friends. I think I was driving a vehicle at 11. I would go to the grocery store and pick up groceries with our food stamps by myself. I was in my first accident when I was like 13. And I still continued to drive. Like that was not only our norm, but it was like I had to, because I had to feed the kids and my mom was working and I was, one of the older ones. I kind of have this mothering personality that I just, I want to take care of them and I want to make sure they're okay. So I kind of took on that role. Well, anyway, that being said, my mom she did a lot of things that were good for us when we were kids. Even though it was really hard and we made mistakes like we all do. She definitely, like giving me my names. Even in hard times, I remember that she would remind me, I named you this, and you have to remember that, you are like God and God is with you and he sees you. And she would remind me that in my hard times or times when I'm afraid of the dark, whatever it was I was going through. Like I remember one time I wanted to be in the talent show, but I was too afraid of everybody. She would say stuff like that. I ended up not doing it. It just wasn't for me. And so she did read her Bible often, and she would read it to us. She did root us with truths, which was really nice. I've realized that that's one of like the most beautiful things she's given us over the years, talking to my husband more. And we did a Bible study the other day as adults in our class, and we were going through a story, and it's not, I don't remember when it was, but it wasn't a common story. And for me, it was, and I didn't realize that. And my husband was like, man, I've never heard that. And I was answering the questions and being like, well, yeah, well, didn't this happen? And he said afterwards, how do you know that? Like, that is so weird. And I'm like, my response to him was, didn't your mom read you that? Which is like, when I say, I say that to him often. And like, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, why is that my reaction? Because I know that my childhood was so different from everyone's. Like, I'm aware of this. But for some reason with my husband, I'm like, didn't your mom give you vitamins every day or make you drink Ensure drinks? Like, and he's like, no, no, my mom did not do those things. Like, we did never take vitamins. And to me, that was like, I don't know. We might not have ever had food or electricity or clothes or shoes or warm coats or Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever the case may be. But my mom would have vitamins. I don't even know where this lady got them. And she would make sure, Michelle, you take your vitamins. Like, okay. So like, it's like deeply rooted in me, and I'm always giving the kids vitamins. So anyway, my mom she did a lot of good stuff, but that was one of them. Another thing she did was, which I do think, now that I'm older, I'm sure you know what that's like. You just realize things your mom does or your parents do, and you're like, I don't blame them. Or you see it in a new light, right? Like my mom, for example, always forgot everything about our births, and she had 10 kids. And at the time, I just thought, how selfish of you. Like, you don't remember how much I weighed or how long I was, like, or what time I'm born. And she'd just be like, no, I don't. I'm sorry, but you can look on your birth certificate. I'm on my
somebody recorded it.
I'm on my 4th pregnancy. I don't have 10 children. And my son asked me that the other day, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm sorry.
You realize how many drugs I was on at the time.
And like, to me, that was so meaningless. Like, it's nice that they recorded it, but I'm not memorizing like how many pounds and ounces you were. Like, it's on the paper. And if you ever need that information, like, here you go. So yeah, looking back, it's funny, you look at your parents and you think, there's so much more grace, I think, as an adult than when you're a child. So one of the other things that my mom did for us, which was really nice, there's a little church down the street in the middle of nowhere, probably like one of the only things around here for miles. And my mom would drop us off. She attended sometimes, but mostly we were dropped off. And I see now, like, she probably thought, yeah, not only is this a nice way to get a break from you guys because I'm by myself, I'm super stressed out, I'm exhausted, there's laundry, you won't stop asking me meaningless questions. But while we were there, we were safe and in good hands, and, given scripture and truths and these things that were we could fill up our souls and hold on to. And, what we all knew was a hard part of our life. You know, we struggled a lot.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, because of my struggling, yeah, I just didn't have a normal childhood. I felt like I had to grow up fast, and I mean, maybe I didn't. Maybe it was more of a choice because of my personality and, you know, who God created me to be. I always knew, as a young child, which again, the irony in this is like, we wouldn't have power sometimes and food. And when the power would come on, I'd watch those sad commercials with that song. I'm sure you know what song I'm talking about. And then like the little kids are just hungry and just staring at the camera, looking at you like, feed me, feed
In the
me.
arms of an angel.
Yes. And I'm like, Mom, we have to help them. And she would laugh at me and say, Michelle, we can't help them. Like we are.
You are that little kid.
And I just didn't get, I'd be like, well, we have mystery cans. We had the church donate us food and they'd be cans with no labels, which was always a fun dinner. I made a lot of the dinners as a child because again, I wanted to, you know, I had the mom mentality and wanted to cook. So I would pull out 4 cans, we'd open them and it's surprise. This is what we're having. Very fun times. But I would cry watching those commercials and tell my mom, like, that's what I want to do. And she was just like, okay, you know, you can do what you want, but you need to remember you're not going to have a lot of money and you're, you know, just kind of giving me the reality of what that would look like often.
Yeah.
And I have another memory. My mom, we did not have a lot of money. And one day she gave me some change that was in her purse to go into Walmart and buy some for myself, which did not ever happen, right? There's 10 of us like fighting for the change. I just happened to be the only one who was with her at the store. And we were going in and there was a little girl coming out crying with her mom that she wanted something and her mom said no and she couldn't get it. And I just burst into tears. Like it wasn't a life or death situation. She probably wanted a piece of candy or a toy that her parents said no. And I couldn't, I was like overcome with sadness and was like, please take my change so you can get the thing that you wanted. And my mom was standing there like, what is wrong with you? Oh man. Yeah, those were fun times. That was me. That was me as a child. And in that, my like as a child, teenager, a lot of my thoughts were not how well I'm doing in school. It was, is my stepdad going to be home today? Is something bad going to happen to me? As I got older, you know, oh no, it's that time of the month and I have no feminine products and like just things that I shouldn't have had to stress about as a child, but I did. And I'm glad because they definitely made me who I am. And I'm so thankful. Oh, one of my favorite examples. I was working with the youth and I told them and they couldn't believe it, which I just thought was so for me. It was when I was a kid, we had 1 soap in the house. If we had soap, my mom would get like the 79-cent bottle of it's like Vaz or VO5. I don't know, like a Suave. Or an off-brand Dawn dish soap. So we would get 1 soap. It did not matter what it was. Like if it said full body for your hair, like we still used it on our laundry and our dishes and your dishes just tasted like, I don't know, full body flowers. It was interesting. It was very interesting. And like, because of that now that I'm I have a soap for everything, but it like blows my mind now how many soaps there are. Like, you can get just soap for your feet. You can get body wash and hair wash and different kinds of laundry detergent. You go to the store,
and, like, you're amazed.
Yes, I'm like, this is such a little thing that people probably take for granted that I'm like, wow, I can get so many soaps. And like my husband does laugh at me. He's like, okay, Michelle, like it's soap. And I'll ask him, can I get this? And he's like, you don't have to ask that. You're an adult with a check. Like, get the soap that you want. I love soap now. It's so much fun. And my dishes don't taste gross. They taste normal.
Win-win.
Yeah. I don't have to wash my body with laundry detergent. Like, it's just so nice. It's the little things in life that, you know, situations like this just make you so much more humble and grateful. Oh, I have to often remind Benea that when he's like getting an attitude. I'm like, you know, I didn't even have half of this stuff. And he's like, oh yeah.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, there you go. I did struggle in school. my thoughts were more on home life, what I was going to eat and what I was going to feed the kids, and if there was food, or if I was going to get dropped off from the bus and come home to no power, what stepdad would be there and what would happen that night. Just things that really I shouldn't have had to worry about. Or, what did happen. There was times I remember I couldn't focus because all I could think about was, how scary or terrible the night before was. So I really, really struggled in school. And unfortunately, didn't have a whole lot of support or outlets in that. Outside of just being told, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, or you keep failing this and this is going to happen. And I failed a lot of classes. And I used to think at the time it was because I wasn't smart. I know now that that's absolutely not true. It wasn't a healthy environment for me to learn and grow in. I didn't have the support, and I didn't have just, the clear mind to be a child and to be a teenager and to learn and to love learning, and to read books and just to be, deeply rooted in all of these wonderful things that the world and God has given us, that I had to worry about, my basic life necessities and my safety.
A lot bigger things to deal with at home.
Yeah.
You couldn't really focus on just being a kid and learning. Yeah.
Right. So that kind of set the tone, I think, for a while on, the way I looked at myself and I thought about myself. And, one day my mom came to me and said, Michelle, you're really, really smart, which I was like, what? Really?
First time hearing that.
Yeah. Okay. She said, I think you would be wonderful. You would do really well if you graduated early. You would have an advantage. You could start college early. All these wonderful things that came with it. And I thought, wow, that sounded good. Now, let me say, there's a lot of moments in my young Michelle self that I have now realized, man, I was so naive. If only I knew, if only I could read into people a little bit more. But to this day, that is something that I think I struggle with, is this this idea that even though I've been through terrible things, I still give people the benefit of a doubt that in their heart, they must be good. How could they not? They must really have my best intentions at heart. I have found again and again that is not always true. So anyway, and it's my mom, and I took her for her word, and I graduated early. I took the test, I got my GED, and at 16 years old, I was done with school and ready to enroll in college. That is until the day after my diploma came in, and my mom told me, yeah, Michelle, I don't have a way to take you up to the school. We live really far. You don't really have a vehicle of your own. I have to work. And I've got, all of these other children at home, which a lot of them weren't old enough to go into public school. They were just too young. So she was like, maybe you can just stay home and watch them. Which I realized then was, I think her motive the entire time. The free built-in mom babysitter, right? The one who cooks and chops and cleans and takes care of the kids.
Which is largely what you had been doing prior to that anyway.
Right. But then during the day, she had to figure it out or pay for childcare or, so here I was stuck at home, and that was really hard for me to just set in. I just had this, as much as I wanted to be a mom, I had this longing to just get away, to do more. I wanted to learn. I had a hunger for life and for something bigger than that. There was this hole that I knew needed to be filled, and I wanted something wholesome and something beautiful and something just rich, if that makes sense. Instead I did the same thing, okay, mystery can for breakfast, mystery can for lunch. Let me change your diaper. What other game can we play with these sticks in the dirt? It was not very fun, and I knew I wanted out. So the first opportunity I took. I had an older sister who lived about 2 hours away. and her and her husband, and she had a baby and one on the way. She said, you can stay with us for a while and get a job here. There's not a college and I can't give you rides, but I live in town at least, so you have the advantage. And I'm not going to make you babysit. So I jumped on it. And I lived with her for a few months. I got a job down the street and I walked to work. And it was all well and good, until it was really my time, and her husband were both in agreement. They only had a 1-bedroom, and the baby was on the way. They're like, okay, if you can rent a room or find somewhere to stay, that would be wonderful. Our family's growing and we're glad you're here. But my sister was only a few years older than me. So she struggled with the same things I did. And I'm sure didn't want to continuously feel like she was taking care of somebody else. I know she wanted her own family and all that. So I did. I moved out and I rented a room. And in that situation, I was raped and had to get out. I never know what to say on this part. Like, how do you tell people that? I don't know if you have to cut this out, but that do I just say that and that's it?
Really up to you. You're saying it. I know because of what we talked about before. You're saying it very dispassionately, which makes sense. If you've been able to detach yourself from it, then you can be matter of fact about it.
And when I don't, I feel like I do get too emotional, and it's not like a way that I can even talk through. I just cry. So, sure. And that's what I meant. Like when people are like, "Oh, you have another child," and then I tell them, and they're like, awkward silence, and I'm like, "Well, now you know. You happy you asked?"
I think people can gravitate toward that, even if they haven't experienced the same trauma.
Okay. Well, I can say, and I do feel like this is part of it that I didn't even mention before. Not that I'm at fault for that situation. I think a lot of these things that have happened to women, and with all this, Me Too movement. What I'm saying, I hope doesn't deflate that or anything, because it's terrible. And I mean, things have happened to me, but I definitely, as a teenager, given my background and my home life, wasn't prepared for the world. I thought things were hard at home and terrible at home, but surely they weren't anywhere else. So I went out into the world not knowing, for one, how to do hardly anything: file taxes, enroll in school, register a vehicle, even getting a job and filling out those papers in the beginning. I don't even know what they're called. How many people to claim. I had no idea what I was doing. And as you can imagine, that was how I interacted with other people. And I definitely put myself in a position that led to tragedy and, trauma for me. So that being said, I do feel like that's important, because I do feel like that is something that, again, led me to where I am now. And some of the things that I do, why I homeschool, and some of the things I teach my children. The world isn't as wonderful and beautiful a place as we would like to imagine. And there are people who, we live in a fallen world, and there are people who don't have our best intentions at heart. And, we see it on the news all the time. There are just bad people, and there are bad people who will take advantage of young girls who don't have a family and don't have a cell phone and don't have, again, I was definitely in a position that I, in a way, put myself in, but it was also out of sheer lack of knowledge and because I was young and naive. So when I do talk about that, I don't often go into detail about being raped, because, for one, I mean, it's taken me 11 years to heal through that with my husband and through therapy and, things like that. So I can either open up and talk to people when they ask, because it happens. It comes up in conversation from time to time, and I can just, be vulnerable and pour my heart out, which often just leads to me crying, and ugly crying, and not being able to talk through it and people not understanding me, or, just kind of really detaching myself and using the word for what it is, and kind of, giving you this is what happened to me. Yeah. This word, this thing, then obviously there's more to it. And a lot that came out of it, and a lot of brokenness and a lot of beautiful things. But at this moment in my life, that's what happened.
Yeah.
Does that help?
It does.
Okay.
And thanks for being vulnerable enough to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I do hope part of that, helps other parents open their eyes to, we got to prepare our children, not just our girls, but our children for situations like this in the world like we live in. Yeah.
Sometimes parents are doing their best to try to shelter their kids from the world, and what they're doing is not preparing them for what's out there.
Right. And I mean, like I said, mine was more of I had stuff like that at home. So I thought surely it wouldn't happen to me elsewhere. And surely I'm big enough to protect myself. And I wasn't, so I think that helping other young girls who might be 16 and in a hard place at home, it doesn't, the grass isn't necessarily always greener on the other side. And you just really got to make sure you surround yourself with people. That was another thing I learned is, family isn't always blood. But surrounding yourself with people who are rooted in the word and are out for your best interest can help you. Don't try to do life on your own.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if you're surrounding yourself with the right people.
Right.
Yeah.
So through that experience, I was pregnant and 16 and by myself, nowhere to go. I mean, literally leaving the hospital and being told by my mom and my sister, you can't come home with us because their investigation was still ongoing and this person was not behind bars yet. So I was a potential threat to the family if I was there. So yeah, I was left what I thought was bad into a worse situation and was alone, literally alone. I mean, the only people that I knew to be family, we didn't have aunts and uncles and grandparents or a dad who didn't necessarily have my back in fear of their own protection and safety. And so I had nowhere to go and nothing to do. It definitely left me feeling even worse about myself and about the world that I lived in. What kind of place is this? And do I want to be here? But I knew one thing for sure. I knew that the child that I was carrying wasn't at fault. Just like I knew I wasn't, at fault for the things that happened in my life and my surroundings. And I knew I wanted better for the child. And I wanted the child to have a good life with good parents. I knew I wanted her, I can say her. I knew I wanted her to have, just the things that I didn't have, and I knew I couldn't provide that. I've often heard people tell me, and I mean, to this day, that's when I said, this comes up in conversation from time to time when people are talking about abortion, and they say, well, I definitely don't think it's right unless somebody is raped. And I'm like, well, even then, and that's, oftentimes where I end up having to share some of my story, but even then, as a 16-year-old going through an incredibly hard time and just my mind, just drowning in darkness and fear, I knew I had those truths in me from when I was young. And I knew, and I had read the word that, life is not ours and it's not ours to take. So I knew, even though this baby inside of me, is mine, her life doesn't belong to me, and my life, it doesn't belong to me. So who am I to take this away? All I can do is give her something that I, what I couldn't at the time. I knew I wanted to still love her and be a part of her life. So we ended up doing an open adoption. She will be 11 in a few weeks, which is crazy to me. Yeah. We talk often. She is beautiful. She has blessed me and so many other people. And I know she will continue to. God said, like we said, God will use beauty or make beauty from ashes. He uses our hard stuff and beautiful things come out of it. And I didn't know what that was like when I was a kid, but I mean, that for me was just one of them. One of the biggest ones was her. She came out of that situation and has blessed a family that struggled with infertility for over 5 years and is now the light of their life. They share her story with people around them, and I know from what they've told me, it's blessed so many people. And And she's only 10. So I'm sure that God's going to continue to use her in her life and do more things.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. So after I had her, I moved to California. I didn't really have anywhere to go. Didn't have my family, and I didn't have my friends either, because, I was 16 when I graduated, and I kind of stopped talking and hanging out with everybody, especially going through a pregnancy and all of that. You can imagine I lost like the cool factor with all my friends and all of those relationships.
Yep.
So I was really kind of alone in that. So I moved to one of the places that I remembered being good. I had fond memories of being a young child in San Diego, and I always thought it was beautiful. To this day, it's one of my favorite places. So I moved there. Ended up, after moving there, I did find my dad. I found him online. I Googled his name often. So that wonderful little church down the street that my mom dropped us off at often would provide us with Christmas, amongst many other things. Every year they gave us a list with 4 lines on it, and we got to ask for anything we wanted. Didn't guarantee we would get it, but it gave them an idea of what to get for us. They shopped for us, they wrapped it, and they would drop it off at our house, which was wonderful. And we always had, we got to look forward to that. I had my younger sister, me and her shared the same mom and dad. But we are absolutely nothing alike. We are opposite in so many ways. I'm very quiet and kind of hold back, and she's opposite, let you know everything that she thinks and what she wants, and likes to be the center of attention, and all of those wonderful traits that I don't have. So I remember she used to laugh at me and say, I cannot believe this is what you're putting. You're so stupid. You're so stupid. How wasteful. That's not what you're going to get. Every year on all 4 lines, I would write my dad or his name or can you find him? Things like that on all 4 lines. And every year I would get socks and headbands or and I know they probably felt so bad. They didn't know what to get me. And my sister would just laugh and say, you're so dumb. Look at all the cool toys I got or the new shoes I got. You wasted. And I'd be like, but I didn't waste it, because you never know. Even though it never happened.
There's still hope.
So anyway, it was interesting that afterwards, moving to California, I had Google searched my dad as long as I can remember. Anytime I had access to a computer, I'd go to the library after school and I would look maybe if I find him, I can get out of this mess. Maybe I can go live with him and see what that would be like. There was just something that, okay, I'm going to try one more time, even though I'm 18 now and in California. And I Googled it, and there he was. He popped up right at the top. He had just a few days prior been arrested and was in the local county jail. So, the odds of that was interesting, which I don't believe in that God does anything out of coincidence or that things are ironic. I think everything he does, from little things like your Christmas list, your soap, little things he uses for a purpose. He's got a plan for us, and the plan is good, and it's all part of it. So yeah, I found my dad, and we started a relationship, and we have, carried that out to this day, which is nice to have someone to talk to on the phone. And my kids recognize his voice when he calls, and that's Papa, which is fun. I will say during that time in San Diego, it was still dark. You can imagine, I moved to a whole new state. I didn't know anybody. I did attend a local church, but it was one of those mega churches where you sit next to somebody new every time. Somebody new hands you your gourmet coffee every Sunday.
And the community didn't really exist.
And there wasn't a community. It was, you come in, you sit down, this amazing praise and worship team comes on, you have a great time, the message fills you up, but afterwards you still fight your way out the door through the crowd and into the busy parking lot, and that's it.
You're just as alone.
I still went back to my small studio apartment on the beach and sat there, spent a lot of times at the ocean, praying and asking God, what? I don't understand this. I did suffer from a lot of your normal postpartum depression, which is common for women, not in my situation, just in normal, healthy marriages with healthy, happy children. It's a common thing to struggle with. And it's, just our sometimes women's normal body way of dealing with that. But I feel like my postpartum definitely, and mixed with depression from my trauma, it was much worse than anything else I'd ever experienced. As you can imagine, I'd given birth to this beautiful baby. And I mean, that experience alone, just my birth story it was hard. I wasn't treated like a person, a mother. And they didn't know the story. They didn't know it was an open adoption. They didn't know I was, get her away from me. I don't even want to see her. I was like, I love her more than anything in this world. And, I want to be a part of her life. I just can't give her everything she needs. And I want her to have that. I want her to have a family plus some. I mean, she's got 2 moms. Not a lot of people can say that. Like, she gets double Christmas. She gets double birthday.
Right.
But they didn't know that. And the nurses didn't take the time to ask, nor did I take the time to share. As you can imagine, giving birth, you're not like, let me tell you my story. And because of that, I was treated very poorly. And a lot of them wouldn't look me in the eye. They wouldn't acknowledge me. They talked to the adopted mom about things. When I had the baby, they took her away. And I don't know, a lot of it was very, very hard and strange. I remember afterwards I was alone again in the hospital room and in a lot of pain and confused, and never had a baby before. And I didn't have like my mom or my grandma to say, well, this is normal, or this is going to hurt. You need to do this.
Yeah.
And the nurses didn't walk me through that either. I was treated like teenage garbage that just couldn't keep her legs closed. And this is my consequence. I remember asking for Tylenol, and I was told no because I was a minor who was alone. And I remember thinking, I can get Tylenol at home. Like,
wow.
This is so bizarre. Like, I said, I remember crying and just it was so much pain. Like, you won't even give me Tylenol? Like, I'm so confused. And I didn't have anyone to kind of, stand up for me. And I'm sorry, it always makes me a little emotional. Anyway, I didn't. There was nobody there to have my back and say, hey, she's in pain, and I'll be there for her. I'm sure they thought I was just some drug addict teenager trying to get something, when in reality, I was just alone and confused and in pain. And wow. So afterwards, that whole first year really was hard. And I didn't come home to this, support system that would walk me through what it looks like to have a baby, or what it looks like to have a baby and not have them anymore. At the time, I know that's a little different now. At the time, open adoption was very, very few and far between. There wasn't blogs, there wasn't books, there was definitely not meetup support groups. I looked and I looked and I looked. I was alone in that journey. Even just bringing it up in conversation was still weird. I was what do people say to you? I feel like they often didn't know what to say. So when it would come up, I found the situations like meeting someone new and them trying to get to know my life or why I was here or, whatever. It just made things awkward and put kind of like a weird gap between us. And I would never see that person again or talk to them, or they just, I could tell they were just uncomfortable around me. So I started just not talking about it. Like, okay, I'm just going to not say anything, which again left me like empty and more alone. Like, here I am continuing to go through this dark time by myself without this like non-judgmental, loving, open arm community that, we should have and we should offer people.
There wasn't anybody to see you for who you were. I imagine it was probably even hard at that point to believe your name meant anything. But does God even see me?
Right. So that was one of the darkest times in my life. And it led me to a place I did feel so alone that I tried to take my own life, and thankfully it didn't work out. I remember afterwards the mother of, like, you know, the adopted mother of my child was like, how could you do that? Like, that, it's so selfish. And I remember being so confused by that. Like, you know, I was thankful that I was alive in the end in the hospital trying to figure it out, but I was just confused. I said, what do you mean? Like, how could that be a selfish choice? And she said, well, how could you do that to our daughter? And I'm like, I wasn't doing anything to her. You know, she has everything she needs. It wasn't, you know, for a long time that I learned, and I'm still learning. And I think that is still a lot of my childhood and my personality, that I am of value and I have something to give to the world. And that even, you know, she needs me, because in my mind, I gave her everything she needed. You know, I gave her life and I gave her a family. And, you know, what could she possibly get from some lost, depressed, alone 18-year-old that has no knowledge or wisdom, or, you know, like, my jokes weren't even good. Like, what am I going to give you?
I did the best thing for her by giving her everything that I'm not.
Yeah. And that's definitely what I told myself and what I really believed, instead of remembering and holding on to those truths that were still in me, but I think were really, really clouded out with darkness. I mean, that was my overwhelming reality, was just lost in darkness. So I knew at that point I needed to do something different. I stopped living in a studio alone and decided to rent a room. I thought maybe that is a way for me to, like, force myself to be around people. Not that I didn't want to. I just, like I said, I kind of didn't know how to. And doing that at church, it wasn't working out.
But still desperate for community.
Yeah. So I thought, well, I'll do this. The only thing I could find available that wasn't with males, because as you can imagine, that was not something I was ready to do again, was this wonderful Vietnamese woman and her daughter that lived in a town in San Diego far away, but it was like a little Asian community. And I thought, you know, like, what do I have to lose? I'm just going to go for it. And it ended up being one of the best decisions I ever made.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week. If you like what you heard, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you do your listening. You can even interact with me directly if you go to anchor.fm/One More Thing Podcast. That's the number 1 More Thing Podcast. There you can click on a link to send a voice message. That's a great way to give feedback or let me know if you too would like to be a guest on the show. It's that easy. Special thanks goes out to BigFish_music for providing our theme music and transitions. If you like what you heard, go check him out on Instagram or Facebook. Thanks again for listening to One More Thing Before I Go. Until next time, be good to yourself and be good to others.